All right, well, let it roll. What the heck?
Happy New Year.
You bet. Absolutely.
Happy New Year.
Our first video podcast for Beat Your Jeans.
Yes. What the heck?
Finally, we join modernity. We drag our carcasses into the 21st century.
There you go. Why not? But Jen's background looks really good.
It does. Yeah. I thought it was yeah.
Yeah.
And the dogs are sleeping. I mean,
the dogs, yes, the dogs have been sedated for the. I'm kidding. They haven't really been sedated, but it's night. It's nighttime here, so they are snoozling at least for now. But I'm sure Mo will get up to cough, so you get to see the coughing in real time. And,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's Mo wearing the sweater. That's Princess and the donut. And then on the couch we have Lucy and I think Peaches must be up there too. So.
Well, we'll try to talk quietly and let sleeping dogs lie. How about that?
They are very attuned to, because I'm on Zoom a lot, they can tell when I'm wrapping up. So probably when we wrap up, they'll get up and start to come and ask for food.
Okay.
So,
How very intuitive. Dr.
They're
Lisle, are your
very-
cats this intuitive?
No, they just sleep, and then the only intuition is just walk up to me. Annalise will just walk up and just stick her claw right in my thigh, right in my shin. That's the message. Go, yeah, I want a treat.
Yeah. You're falling behind on your schedule, your duties.
So, all right. Well, what are we up to these days?
Well, today is our, this is a brand new year. And I guess I was talking to Dr. Howk and telling her that on one hand, give the people what they want, which is to hear about, resolutions and weight loss and things like that. On the other hand, what do you guys think? Do you guys have any resolutions, or what sort of process do you guys go through in the new year?
I'm giving Jen 30 days. She's got till February 1st.
Doug, I swear to God, I've had one of the worst months, if not the worst month of my life in December. Shit happened, this was some Big Lebowski shit.
Yes.
And Doug says I have a month of moping. I'm allowed to mope for a month. That's the rule. He's been given. I have 30 days. So
31.
Yeah.
You got lucky. January's got an extra.
Oh my God. It takes what it takes. All right.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So I was just about how we're gonna ramp up
because I'm the holdup.
And,
I'm the reason the book is delayed.
No, it's a joint project delaying the book. It takes a lot of effort to keep that book down.
We see this blank space right here. That's where the book is supposed to go. I made a little carve out right there, and it's going to be blank right there for a while.
I should have brought it. It's upstairs. I should have brought. You probably have a prop that you could wave it around for the people who were watching on video.
We'll get back to that. We'll have a lot. This will be the year of the book, and there'll be all kinds of announcements and all kinds of stuff. So, I've got my artist has a week off. So we're going to get her moving on some of the art that she's going to do. So yeah, it's all coming together.
So does that constitute your New Year's resolution? Getting the book done? Is that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I don't think there's any. I'm now confident where we stand in the book now that it'll be done. I think we'll be not only done this year. I think we'll have a copy in our hands by the end of the year. So I think we'll start distributing it in a year. So anyway, that's where that is. And what else is happening? Do we have questions anymore, or do we just chit chat?
It's small talk. It's the new year. We got to have a little small talk. Come on. This is why we're moving to video, so we can actually be humans instead of just disembodied voices. So it's
sure.
Yeah.
Dr. Lisle, I didn't mind the disembodied voices that much, but
it just makes sense to an engineer. That way. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, Jen doesn't realize I have the questions overlaid onto both of your faces anyway, so I can't see you guys.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
What about you, Nathan? Do you have resolutions? How's your relationship with all things New Year?
I'm still trying to finish some of the things I should have finished in 2023, but I never really did the New Year's thing of like start January 1st. It's more like just, endless goals, and if they finish up a little early or if they finish up a little late, just keep working on them. And sometimes I'm good at it, sometimes I'm not that good at it. And the main thing with Beat Your Genes actually is just putting it online in video format, and so trying to grow our presence just a little bit more, because I think up until now we really haven't done any promotion at all, other than I think Chef AJ has given a lot of promotion. People in the plant-based world who know Dr. Lisle, know all three of us through the plant-based world. They've kind of heard of it, through the grapevine, but we really haven't done any type of social media promotion where people can easily share clips, little snippets, your answers, Dr. Howk, your answers, Dr. Lisle, some things that are easily shareable. So that obviously I'm green at this. I'm only know it as a consumer, so I'm going to try my best and see what happens. But that should be a fun little project to take on and see if we can grow some audience right in time for the book to come out, so that we can seed the book and your ideas with a lot of people to begin with.
Yeah, beautiful. That sounds great. Jen's been bugging us to do this, and I've been too busy to think about it, and so now we just did it, and it wasn't really that hard.
It's just another Zoom
had to hit a
call.
link.
Yes, we live in the time of Zoom, so yeah, and nothing changes on audio. It stays the same for audio listeners. So
yep. I'm gonna keep uploading it just to the normal audio channels, and then we're gonna have a YouTube channel. We have a YouTube channel that we're gonna upload the full thing, and then I'll be able to clip it out, here and there with some really, good answers, or, 2-minute long things. And I encourage the audience to share them, whenever you feel compelled to. One option that is interesting is, Twitter, or, every time I say X, formerly known as Twitter, I feel like I'm saying the artist formerly known as Prince,
like, so ridiculous.
But we all know what Twitter is. But Twitter, Elon Musk has been trying to get people to put their podcast episodes on Twitter. But right now, I think the problem that's stopping it is that they don't really have a lot of monetization like they do on YouTube. But that doesn't have a problem for us, because it's not like it's not like we're raking it in with anything with YouTube. So we might put a few clips on Twitter and see if the EP world of Twitter would actually share that's easily shareable on Twitter much better than YouTube. And also, so if we do get censored, we have options there too. So
yeah. That's true. If we get disappeared, we'll still be on Twitter at least.
Yes.
Yes. Last retreat of the scoundrel.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. All right. What about yourself, Jen? How many trees are going to be planted?
I mean, that was my only resolution last year, was to plant 365 trees. And I just stopped counting at some point, but I blew way past that. I mean, I don't even know. It was a ridiculous number of trees. So I don't know if I hit 1,000, but it was definitely more than 365. So yeah, keep planting trees. I have kind of some more existential experiments that I'm running in my own life, in terms of like I'll talk about that on my more mystical podcast if people are interested in that. That's the face of the deep. So some sort of different ways of just working through interpersonal issues and new relationships to conflict, testing the boundaries of the potted plant theory, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm a big fan of running experiments to see what happens, just in all dimensions. So that's kind of my main resolution.
Grant. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well.
All right. Now let's get to some questions. How about that?
A question or two to see what happens.
All right. Our first question, dear doctors, and also, by the way, Dr. Lisle, Dr. Howk and I, we went over this question when we had a solo episode, but then we talked about it and thought maybe a good idea to get you to wind out a lot about it as well, and then both of you. So, dear doctors, can all personality types be equally happy if they apply diligent effort to worthwhile goals? In other words, all other things being equal, would a low conscientiousness individual be as happy as a high conscientiousness individual if they both applied their own version of diligent effort and equally felt they hadn't left anything on the table, despite maybe those levels of effort and results being very different?
The answer is no. In other words, all people, the amount of happiness juice that people have in them differs just naturally. And so, in fact, I would bet that low conscientious people on average are happier than high conscientious people. The whole point of high conscientiousness is the anxious nervousness, worst case scenario, catastrophizing that takes place inside the high conscientious head. And so they're going to spend an awful lot of the hours of this life worrying about bad things that could happen, and essentially spending a lot of, i.e., statistically relative to the actual threats out there in the world and how the average human brain optimally analyze the cost benefit of trying to mitigate those threats. A high conscientious person is over investing in that mitigation. Just by definition, that's what's happening. And so we can believe that emotionally what's taking place along with that high amount of energy that's going into essentially loss mitigation or loss, basically catastrophe reduction strategies. What goes along with that isn't a cold-blooded process. It's an emotional process, meaning it's anxiety. And so so therefore, you can better believe that particularly in a reasonably benign environment, the 30th percentile conscientious person is happier than the 90th percentile conscientious person, almost inevitably. So now there are, so what you're going to see is that question becomes so fractured and so impossible to follow every possible contingency that it's not even worth analyzing it, other than to say that it would be a miraculous derivative of the laws of psychology to have it be that all of these things would be equal. And the answer is, so I don't think that they are. I think just from the rather obvious interactions that I've had with the 15 or 20,000 people that I've interacted with in my life, people differ dramatically in how innately happy they are, just period. Regardless of what the hell is happening. And so, yeah, I think that the happiness mechanisms work the same in all people. In other words, just in the same way that all kidneys work the same and all hearts work the same. So a normal functioning heart works the same in every single racehorse, but Secretariat's heart was twice as big as a normal thoroughbred's heart. And that's why that horse was Secretariat. Okay, so some people have twice as much happiness juice as other people. They live very happy lives, almost irrespective of what the hell is happening around them. Other people live lives full of trepidation and worry and concern and anxiety and semi-depression, despite the fact that they're in really, really benign circumstances and everything's going well. So the biggest single determining factor in an individual's life experience is actually how much happiness juice they're born with. The environmental context is obviously huge, and it's the only thing that we can control, but the baseline starts with genetics. That's how it is.
That's fantastic. Hold on, let me get some happiness juice here.
Mm-hmm. He's drinking water for people who are just listening. Have to be mindful of we don't want to get too caught up in our video experiment and forget that a lot of people are just on old school radio. Yeah, that was basically when we went over it. I think I had a very similar answer from a slightly different angle. I was focused mostly on that phrase that's doing a lot of work in the question, which is the all things being equal with diligent effort, and that those high conscientious people are kind of never feeling like they haven't left anything on the table, that they just never get to that point of feeling like, well, hey, I've done my absolute best and we'll just, chips are going to fall how they fall and I'll figure out my happiness going forward from there. Because for that super conscientious and or super neurotic personality, they're constantly running that counterfactual and I coulda, shoulda, woulda, like I knowing what I know now, I should have done better in the past. And it's this constant sort of edginess within that personality type. And so that if that's the predictor of the happiness juice that you're talking about, that's kind of the mechanism by which it's working. And I've seen that happen a lot. So in theory, if a conscientious person or a highly neurotic person or a combo, it's usually a combo, could get to the point where they had really felt like, I've done my absolute best here, and I'm just going to accept the results however they come, then yeah, they maybe in some theoretical state could be equally happy, but they can't generally get to that place.
Yeah. And then we have to add in other things too. So you have to add in disagreeable. So
Yeah.
the more disagreeable people are, the more they're just in generally unhappy that they don't feel like they got a fair shake. And
Yeah.
so that's another, we throw that variable in there. Bottom line is different people have different amounts of happiness juice. That's it. And it's pretty damn big in terms of the variance, as you'd expect, just as it's pretty big damn variance with respect to IQ, with respect to openness, with respect to conscientiousness, with respect to introversion, extroversion. There's a pretty big disparity between people that are in the top 10 percentile for happiness juice and the people that are in the bottom 10. And that's just, it's kind of, as a clinical psychologist, when you see a 10 percentile happiness juice person walk through your door, it's like, okay, all right, we're going to do the best we can. You know what I mean? We're going to try to move your life experience up, and we probably can, using just the same template as we would use to move somebody from 70 to 80, or somebody from 40 to 50, or from somebody that is experiencing life at 30, but is genetically at 70, and therefore we have a huge upside because they just got an obstacle that they're being frustrated by. But when you watch a 10 percentile limp through the door, and it's the happiness juice is 10 percentile, it's not very inspiring, I have to tell you. It's like your upside is to take this person from an F to a D- in terms of their life experience. And it's kind of a thankless task, and you do the best you can.
Is it ever worth it to, I don't know, I guess I'm asking you strategy, but would you inform the person, hey, listen, it feels to me like you really have a limit to how much happiness you can actually feel?
I just right off the bat, Nathan, I just say, listen, you've only got 10 percentile happiness juice. This is doomed. You can go talk to Dr. Steinmetz next door. He's psychodynamic, and he's going to say there's big upside if you excavate what happened in your childhood to cause this. But good luck, not me.
Yeah, like I took a ice skating lesson, a couple of years ago, and I was trying to get better at ice hockey. And in my mind, I just remember, thinking that the teacher's probably thinking, all right, we got to get this straight. They're training kids that are going to be in the NHL, and I hear this 30-year-old clunky dude comes in on the ice, and it's like, well, let's get one thing straight: you're never going to play in the NHL. So I wonder if it behooves anybody to tell them that, or will it discourage them? Will it make any difference?
You can tell them diplomatically,
maybe gently.
Yeah. You're not going to. Doug is definitely being sarcastic when he says he's going to. I think he's being sarcastic, but definitely, I've gotten to the point sometimes with people where you can kind of come at it a little sideways and be like, I understand that you have a really pessimistic outlook on life here, and that's going to kind of limit the possibilities that you can envision for yourself. And I feel like I can give you a lot of suggestions, but you're sort of in a place where you're going to be shooting all those down, and you can crab walk your way in. And I have found different ways of sometimes when you illuminate someone about their distortion like that, they will actually, it's a form of sharp angle, and they'll sort of get out of that Eeyore mode a little bit and be more receptive to running some experiments. But as Doug is suggesting, you're not changing the baseline of their nature fundamentally.
Yeah, I would also say that just like people that have low functioning on some organ system physically, it's good enough to function. You know what I'm saying? In other words, if the major problems are eliminated or reduced substantially, they can usually be okay. It's just not, it's just not a lot of fun. That's different than a person who may be neurotic and unstable and has very substantial challenges that they're really frustrated about, and they can be all the way to suicidal. And it's like that. There are problems there that are causing them very, very significant consternation, and they're extremely frustrated that they can't solve them. That's different. That's a genetic 30th percentile that's operating at the first percentile because of circumstances. And those are, it's rare that you have clinical problems that you can't make progress with, but once in a blue moon, you can't. I mean, I've hit my limit a few times. I've been at this for 40 years. So there's been a few cases that have walked through the door where it was frustrating for me that there was nothing that I could do to actually solve the problems. Even if I look at clinical work the way I do it, and Jen and I are different. We probably overlap 80% in our thinking on a lot of things, on many things, and so we're going to sound similar. I know that because sometimes when people have talked to Jen, then they call me and then I say this because, well, that's what Jen told me. So we know that we overlap quite a bit. I think Jen's a little more, I would say a little more sort of holistic. In other words, a little more, there's a more of a humanity aspect to it and a relational aspect into it than it is the way I do things. I can look that way, but the truth is, I look at my clinical problems from the following perspective, and that is that I look at it as a chessboard. So I look that they're coming to me basically frustrated because they're being beaten in chess, and they're being beat by generally competitors. In other words, there's a aggregate competitor out there on the other side of the chessboard. It might be men, it might be women, it might be employers, it might be the marketplace, it might be their family and their status with respect to specific individuals. But whatever it is, it's effectively an esteem competition, and the person has tried their best at this competition, and they're being defeated, and so they don't know really what to do, and they're really frustrated and demoralized, depressed, etc. My job is to come in, like I said, not particularly holistic. It's quite a departure from Carl Rogers. It's complete departure from anything psychodynamic, and it is somewhat of a departure from how a normal, kind, warm person like Jen would do things. Okay. But we share some similarities in the sense that Jen will recognize this concept, although our approaches would be somewhat different. But I'm going to ask a bunch of questions because the nature of the chessboard that is in front of them, all of their information and understanding of the chessboard, they have a perception of what moves are possible, and they have a perception of what the competition looks like. And I need to know not only what the chessboard looks like as best as they can describe it, i.e., who are the personalities, what are your limitations, who are your competitors, what resources that you're frustrated about, why. I need to know everything about this, and then I need to know what your perception is of what you've tried, why do you assess the competitors in the way that you do, etc. I need to know everything about this person's chess playing history. And then once I have that in front of me in my mind, then I say, we're moving bishop to king 3. Okay, this is the next move we're making. And let me explain to you why we're doing that. Okay, so this is I see clinical problems as resource acquisition problems. And the chief central resource that the person is seeking is almost always esteem from somebody. And so therefore I see these things as fundamentally competitive problems. And there would be other perspectives. The bizarre thing to me about clinical psychology is I don't know of any other major clinical theorist anywhere that sees these things as competitive problems. The closest thing I've ever heard is we have to go back 100 years to Adler. And Adler saw these things as striving, that the person is struggling with striving for superiority. They have an inferiority complex. I mean, he's framing this as if this is somehow bizarre or odd. It's like, no. These are resource acquisition competitive problems. These are the problems of life. And I think this perspective arrived as reasonable to me simply by reading Richard Dawkinson's Selfish Gene. In other words, it's like, hey, the whole damn thing is one big competition. That's what life is. And until I never understood that, I never even had, of course, we all know it. In our back, there's a background knowledge that we're in competitive enterprises. But nobody in psychology, in all of my years in academic psychology or in looking at any pop psychology, nobody talked about this thing as a competition. In fact, you were supposed to be above it. And in fact, it's supposed to be not be competitive. And only certain little forays, and sometimes in cognitive therapy, they would talk about that, basically trying to tease down ego trap phenomena. But literally looking at the clinical problem, I'm not looking at this as a component of the problem. I'm looking at it as the problem. Okay, there's an ancillary problem of self-esteem that goes alongside of this that has to do, with some other competitive issues about ego trap phenomena that have to do with inferences about what other people would think of you under different conditions, et cetera. But the fundamental thing is resource acquisition. And it has to do with the person's frustration with respect to resource acquisition. Those resources have a lot of different looks, but the central meta resource of human nature is esteem. And so so I look at this as nothing other than I need to understand why you're frustrated with your outcomes with respect to how you played the esteem chessboard. And I'm going to now tell you how I think it works. And I'm going to tell you what moves I think that you've been making a mistake on. And I'm going to tell you what move we're going to make next to do what? Run an experiment. Okay. Because I expect that if we do what I say and we move bishop to king 3, I think this is what we're going to see. Okay. And then we'll find out. I could be wrong. There could be more to the story. If the chessboard is Mr. Spock's, three-dimensional chessboard, it's complicated. We've got moving pieces and people of personalities. We've got amazing things that I sometimes get flabbergasted by, which is motives that are inside my client that I didn't know were there until we started to move the pieces. That happens.
Hidden agendas,
okay?
You mean?
Yeah, they've got agendas or they've got other processes going on that I don't even know until I start leaning on us to move a chess piece, or we move one and then something happens, and then et cetera. So anyway, that's sort of a long story, but there are other ways to go about this process. And I think that Jen can wind out on this, but there's another way, there's another very important way that one way that comes very much out of Carl Rogers, which is that I'm going to look at this person as a person who is a coalition and reassurance deficient. And I'm going to be gentle and patient as we develop a relationship, and I essentially become part of this person's habitat in an important and useful and positive way. That is bizarrely enough, that's not really something that I consider. Okay, and yet that feeling, which is a legitimate one, is one that can come along with and be an important part of the clinical process. But I'm not so akin to that. If that happens with me, it's almost ancillary, almost accidental. Whereas I think with with Jen, it's going to be, that's probably going to be equal footing with understanding the chessboard. I don't know. What do you think, Jen? Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of assumptions and commitments to just the process that I think are directing the whole thing. So Jordan Peterson has this phrase, "Don't steal someone else's problem." Have you heard me talk about this or mention
Not
this
quite.
before?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this was something that he had in his own practice. Like just don't steal the problem. Don't steal their problem. Don't make it your own. Don't tell them exactly what to do. Don't go home and stew on it yourself. You're gonna torture yourself as a clinical psychologist that way, according to him.
Right.
And obviously, I'm not a clinical psychologist. I don't even play one on TV. I'm just a coach. Got to have the disclaimer out there.
Yeah, make sure we get that legally disclaimed.
And so I definitely am not in the practice of stealing anyone's problem, but I sort of have this existential commitment to not doing that just as at an ethical level, like they have to solve the problem. I can kind of lay out the logic of it and describe what's going on from an evolutionary perspective or from another kind of hybrid perspective with some other holistic components, which I often will do. But and I will, as far as I will go with somebody, is usually like, well, if I were in your shoes, I might think about doing the following thing, or this is probably a good experiment that you could run. But I definitely have sort of a reluctance to say, okay, on the chessboard, you need to move this piece to there, because that's going to be the way to do it. And I think that whatever sort of Carl Rogers approach that has emerged from that comes just from my sort of reluctance to steal the problem and to kind of make their decision for them, because I know when someone does that for me, it can be very relieving. It can be very like, oh, I've had, Big Louie has solved my issue. I'm relieved of this problem. But I'm missing something. I'm lacking something. I'm disempowered in some way in that process. And so I don't want to extend that when I'm working with people for the most part. And it's not like I made a conscious decision about that and I approach coaching from that perspective. It just sort of emerged from a series of assumptions and convictions that I have. So
those are that is that's a more normal clinical humility that you find in people that are very easy to talk to and very easy for people to work with. It's kind of like it's almost like a bell curve, like liberal and conservative, and then there's people in the middle. And over here you've got fanatics on the left, and over here you've got fanatics on the right, and they're actually extremely similar. And so as you go to the fanatics on the left over here, you get your psychodynamic people that are determinedly telling you this and that and the other about why it is that you are the way you are, and et cetera, et cetera. And that's pretty worthless. In the middle, you have this sort of very reasonable, in Jen's case, you got a combination between this sort of very reasonable clinical demeanor alongside a very unusually informed demeanor. So that's very unusually informed mind. So you got those two things that works really well. Over here, you've got me, who is kind of like the fanatic on the other side. But the truth of the matter is, there's a difference when you're taking over somebody's chessboard, whether you're right or wrong.
I mean, you're not the Freudian fanatic saying, oh, you're stuck at the oral stage or whatever, and that's why you're dealing with this. Like, there's a similar kind of conviction and insistence on this is what's happening and this is what you need to do, but they're wrong.
Yes, exactly.
And so, and they're not even wrong to the extent that evolutionary psychology could be wrong. It's just wrong in an incomplete sense, at least in my interpretation. Like there might be other well, you just said it yourself, and people might have motivations and hidden agendas and other things going on that are not immediately visible and bringing you the chessboard.
Yes.
And so you can kind of look at the chessboard and say, this is the move that you need to make, but you don't necessarily know the full broader context. And so you can, in principle, say this is the right thing to do and be incomplete in that assessment, but you're not completely off base in the nature of reality that you're describing in the same way that a Freudian assumption would
No
be.
question. No, so very often, once in a while, everybody's situation is different, but what will happen often with me is that I might ask a tremendous amount of questions for half an hour.
Yeah.
And the reason why is that I'm learning the chessboard. Okay. And then when I get an information, and I will do hypotheticals, I'll say, okay, well, if this was the situation, that was the situation, then what would you do? Then what would you feel? So I'm going through, I'm mapping out chessboard moves because I'm trying to figure out what their internal chessboard looks like. And then once I feel like I know, I'll say, okay, well, what if this was the situation? And then I'm looking for this immediate visceral reactions that says, yes, well, if that were true, then I'd feel a lot better. It's like, okay, now I understand it. And then I'm saying, we're moving bishop to king 3. And here's why. So it's there's sort of the distinction would be that one could otherwise educate people slowly, learning and building the rapport of being a teammate or a guidance person, and then watch them as they find themselves something like bishop to king 3. In other words, we're as we educate them, we could do it that way, or we could do it, my way.
Well,
that's why,
I feel like we need to insert some Sinatra here. There's little we need some, now that we have video capability.
Not that it's my favorite song or anything like that.
No. I have footage of Doug singing My Way, by the way, which one of these days will go on like some hidden members only website.
Put the link in the book somewhere.
Exactly. Secret document.
So
but,
what I'm getting from both of you is so Dr. Lisle, do you ever worry, or is there ever concern that by you making the move for the person, have them run the experiment, that they might get dependent on you for the next move and the next move and the next move when there's an issue? And then consequently, Jen, Dr. Howk, are you doing this to kind of keep them independent of essentially not taking care of the problem yourself, or just making sure that they figure it out themselves, or is this just doesn't do this for them?
I want people to feel empowered that they played the most important role in solving the problem. Like that's a conviction that I have. And so, I don't, when I kind of notice, and I will notice sometimes that people will get to a point where they are checking in on things that I can tell that they know what to do. They are just kind of looking for my permission to do things like that. That is something that I'll try to kind of steer back on that. That's when I'll make note of it and be like, okay, this is they're really trying to give me the problem. and I really want them to retain ownership of the problem, not to protect myself, but for their own sake, for their own pride, for their own self-esteem, for their own confidence. And so I have noticed that happen sometimes, and I have seen that in myself when I've been in some sort of counseling relationship, where I really, there is this kind of instinct and this yearning that we have for the elders to solve the problem for us, to take this off my plate, to fix it, take my pain away. I just have this kind of deep belief that that's not my place.
Yeah, this is it's actually interesting. Slightly, these are bell curve distinctions. This reminds me a great deal of teaching statistics. So in teaching statistics, what happens is we now would understand that the mind is looking for patterns, and when you're learning mathematics of any kind, there are laws to what is happening. And then when things are happening that you don't understand, it's because you haven't grasped the underlying law of causality that is being described by the mathematical rules. And so in teaching statistics, it gets very interesting because there are things in statistics that they're so far outside people's frame of reference that a very smart person can't get it. And so as someone who taught stats, I don't know how long, 6-7 years. Okay. So I taught scads of students statistics, and they'd be in my office hours and they would be desperate to try to understand something. And I would have to, first I do it this way, then I do it that way, then I do it another way. In other words, I'm doing it for them. Let's look at this problem. And so they're watching me, and I'm trying to have it done in such a way that they ultimately grasp the pattern. And the joy comes when they go, I think I got it. Like the brain unconsciously goes, got it. Finally, I understand what the hell you've been talking about for 20 minutes. Okay, what happened? Okay. And so then the job is, okay, let's do another one. Okay. So now I set it up and I say, now what are you thinking? Okay. So this is you can see two different instructors having having varying degrees of how much we wait while you stare and you can't get it. I mean, it's not like I won't wait for 10 seconds, but my attitude is, nah, if you can't get it in 10 seconds, I think it's a waste of my time waiting around for why you get embarrassed and you can't solve it. I'm going to do another one, and I'm going to get inside your head, and I'm going to try to figure out what it is that you don't understand. So this is sort of what we're really seeing, as we usually see when any problem in any interesting curiosity that we see, stylistic differences in anything are quantitative variation. And so this is a quantitative variation of sort of patience, trust. Essentially, I don't trust them. I don't think they're going to solve it. I don't want that to remain unsolved. I'm going to stick the solution more and more clearly in front of them. You know what I'm saying? And I'm going to see if they get it. And if they get it, great. Because then they're like, got it. Now I understand. Okay, good. Okay. You don't understand, then I'm not understanding about why you don't understand. So this is but the lens that this is happening. I had a supervisor once that actually trained under Carl Rogers. And it was very interesting because hilariously, he was extremely similar to Carl Rogers. He just personality-wise. And so if he did a meeting, nobody was in charge. It was all this fluid. You know what I mean? The group was supposed to emerge with a solution. And I'm like, really? I'm going to have to wait around here 45 minutes and be polite when I've got the solution in the first 40 seconds? Disgusting. But he had this tremendous patience and kindness, and everybody could feel it. And that's what would happen. And meanwhile, then 45 minutes later, ultimately, then I say what the solution is, and we do it live. That's how it happens. Sweet guy. His name is Dr. Dahl of all things. And so but that's a stylistic personality difference that comes to interpersonal process and problem solving. Kind of an interesting one. I don't know how on earth we got off this topic.
Yeah, we wandered over here from some question. It's one question.
Yeah,
special.
We were just talking about happiness and how it can apply equally within diligent effort and solution.
Oh, yeah.
You guys were talking about your clinical strategies for different things. So.
Oh, right, and whether we tell people, hey, you don't have any happiness juice. That's where it all started. Yeah. Well, I think I was talking recently about how inspired I've been by this idea in the Quaker tradition of like circles of trust or clearing committees, where really there's a group, and a group can be very small. It can even be two people with someone who has a problem. And it's really, that's even further out on the bell curve than I am, where you're not really interfering at all as the listener. You're really asking questions, and that's all you're doing. And you're being very, very vigilant to not ask leading questions. But you are really just trying to get that person to run their own process, to really kind of see their inconsistencies and hear themselves saying things out loud and confront them differently than they've been doing. And I think that's a really powerful idea. I am somewhere, north of the the patience that you have, but I'm not quite at that point. Right. And I do think often, like, the idea that people need good information for a good cost benefit analysis, like giving the lay of the land from an esteem dynamics perspective, is important in almost every situation. So if people don't understand that, you can't, you ask all the questions all day that you want, but if they're not really understanding competitive processes and the esteem on the table that they're looking to gather up, and they're kind of coming at it from totally the wrong angle, then I do feel it's necessary at some point to educate on those dimensions. But yeah, it's definitely somewhere between two extremes for me.
Yeah. And I would say where I haven't done such a good job from time to time is when I'm too focused on education and not focused enough on being patient with their process. It's complicated. This is no, I thank God, gone a long time before I talked anything about athletics. Nathan pissed first. He talked about hockey. But the point is that
we made it like 45 minutes. I'm impressed.
every player of every sport is slightly different. So they can learn the fundamentals and they can execute the fundamentals, and a completely educated player can do all the fundamentals well. But they are stylistically, genetically, personality, they're just different. And it's amazing how one of the things that's really interesting to watch in the NBA is that there are players that arrive at 19 years old and they're complete, and they will be as good. They'll take 2 months getting up to speed. In other words, they're like, oh God, whole different level of competition. You know what I mean? It's a whole different level of body push. In other words, there's a lot to get used to. But if you check them out in the final 2 months of season number 1, they're not a lot different in season 8. It's like they were a 90th percentile player. It was in there and it emerged pretty quickly. And then they were not a 99th percentile player, and they were not a 70th percentile player. They looked every bit like a 90th percentile player, and it showed up early. And that is, I remember seeing Kyrie Irving's statistics from his rookie year. Kyrie Irving being a phenomenal, one of these extraordinarily rare players in basketball history, probably the single best ball handler in the history of the NBA.
Even I've heard that name, so he has to be a big deal. So
yes, he's the kid that stuck the 3-pointer in Steph Curry's face and won the 2016 championship, him and LeBron James. So he was undoubtedly LeBron James' favorite player to play with. Just because it was extraordinary talent. And but anyway, Kyrie, I looked at his stats from his rookie year. They're like, no different. You look at him 8 years later, it's like unbelievable. How the hell was that already there at 19 years old? And the answer is, it was in there. And so this is it's the personality of the athletics and the person situation. Not that you can't grow and learn, but my personality hasn't changed from the very first client I ever saw to the one that I saw this morning. It's like, 40 years later, it's the same dude. It's just I know a lot more. But the very same kind of on this particular dimension that we've been picking around on. So that's in people. And then from there, it's basically, how accurate are you? You know what I'm saying? how knowledgeable and accurate are you at this process? That's going to, that plus who it is that you are natively. Oh, I was going to say, if there's an Achilles heel that I have had, it's that I'm not patient enough. You know what I mean? And so that my lack of patience, somewhere in there, I'm tapping my foot, you know what I mean, ready to put it on the gas. And so that's something that, you know, Dr. Dahl and Carl Rogers would never do, and Jen would be very unlikely to do. So these are these things. The clinical process itself is, you know, cannot help but be wedded to some degree to the personality, including a bunch of disagreeable, sanctimonious, psychodynamic people. But I got to tell you, that's what you see a lot over in that camp.
Yeah, that's very true. A lot of disagreeableness all over the space, but especially in that camp.
Yeah. All right. What else we got, Nathan? We got anything else we want to kick around?
Yeah, we've got questions. It's kind of nice that you guys wound out on this one question this whole time. Actually, I like it because the rest of the questions all have to do with dating. And so, you know, if it's not about happiness, if it's not about, you know, losing weight and health, it's about sex and dating. So, our next question. Actually, let's go to this one about resource sharing. So, dear doctors, I'm 51, happily married for 2 decades, and I have 1 child. But me and my husband recently had a huge fight regarding whether we have responsibility to help others. We have a friend who had a messy, complicated divorce and is struggling financially while still fighting her ex in court over child custody and business matters. He's a lying, unpredictable scam artist. As much as I feel sorry for our friend, I would like to keep a distance from the situation. But last time we saw her, my husband offered to pay for a lawyer and an accountant. While we live comfortably, we don't have the money this woman would need to become unentangled. When we got home, I started yelling that my husband should not have made this offer because we really can't afford it, and I don't want her criminal ex-husband knowing that we are helping her. While my cavewoman instinct was to protect my financial stability, I found it more effective to overemphasize the physical threat that this could have on me, since my husband travels a lot and her ex knows where we live. The fight escalated. My husband accused me of being selfish, uncharitable, unwilling to help. And I said that my time and energy should go into caring for my family and my home. So we've already given this friend money and our time over the years. From an evolutionary psychology point of view, I understand I feel a threat to my resources, both financially and emotionally, as well as physical safety. My husband does not see this situation at all like I do. Shouldn't a caveman have the instinct to primarily care for his family only and not to spread their resources to another man's family? My son likes her kids. I would like to avoid any possible bad influence, as one is already dabbling with marijuana. So my threat to my offspring is also another concern. Please, any insight?
Well, seems like we've answered this before, haven't we, Jen? Or did we
I don't remember this one. We've had very
may have been too
ones.
long to read.
But yeah, it's amazingly, that's a lot of information in that question, but it's not the information that I really want, which is what is the nature of this friendship? Like who is this person? Who is she primarily friends with? It sounds like probably the husband. Like, how do they know each other? Are they exes? Is he interested in her? Like there's a lot kind of simmering below the surface there that I don't see in this question that makes this sort of impossible to answer as a total hypothetical, because his interest in helping her is very, very higher than we would expect, than just sort of general resource redistribution to win some acclaim in the village. So I don't know, what did you clue into that too, Doug, or what are you thinking?
In big red painted letters, 7 feet high.
Yeah.
That's like, and also his defensiveness about being confronted about it and attacking her as being selfish. This is a very interesting and disturbing thing. I mean, at best, this is Victor Laszlo in Casablanca.
Well, that would be a very good scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but
Definitely.
then he'd have a history of it, and if you've been married for decades, this would be a fight that you've had many times before.
Right.
If he's just like Mr. I'm going to give all my money away and help all the poor little maidens in the village, this would not be the first time that you've dealt with this issue. But the fact that it sounds like it is makes me wonder what's unique to the dynamic between these two individuals.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. So yeah,
definitely.
I smell a big fat chippy rat.
Definitely, that is the hypothesis which must be dispensed with. We need more
Yeah,
little more evidence to figure out what's going on there.
yeah, yeah. All right, all right. Throw us one more, Nathan.
All right, let me pull it up here. Okay. Okay. Our next question is all right, we're going to go question about online dating. So you have previously
Oh,
characterized
we're really knowledgeable about that.
Doug most of all.
Knowledgeable. Boy, that's in quotes, whatever that means. Yeah.
You've done your own research.
I've done a lot of my own research. Yeah. All right. What do we got?
All right, so you've
That's like
previously
a cripple telling you about how to ride a horse. It's like, what happened to you? Well, I used to ride horses. All right, Nathan, let's see what the question is.
all right, you have previously characterized men as pair bonders or not. How has online dating changed the cost benefit analysis here for both sexes?
Well, I would say that the correct conceptualization of I don't know that I ever said that they were pair bonds or not. I mean, somebody might have quoted me out of context on that, because that is not how I think of this at all. In other words, I see that men have within them, and I've definitely said this, they have both strategies. They're both resident programs inside the male's brain, and they are activated in a given situation with a good given female. It's context dependent. And I would say in the last many years, I would also say that any relationship possibility that they're reacting to isn't actually necessarily pair bond versus casual mating strategy. It's on a continuum. And at some level on that continuum, it feels to the female like this is serious business, that she would identify this as pair bond strategy. And at some different level, she can tell that it's reading like casual mating strategy. There's also going to be some mealy mouth, very difficult to discern, territory in between those two. And that's going to be sort of the mystery about what chips she wants to risk while she tries to figure out where he's at and how interested she is in him and all that sort of thing. So online dating, I'm not sure what it has done to I actually, Jen probably knows more about this than I do. Like I don't actually know sociologically what has transpired. I know that certainly you see certain extremes have made themselves more evident. So people that used to be hanging out at singles bars and hitting on people and walking off with them are now on Tinder. You know what I mean? So but I don't. But just generally speaking, I'm not sure what I would think about what has shifted. Jen, you have any intuition about this?
Yeah, every time you get this question, I think we always say there must be a big literature on this in sociology specifically, and probably economics and a few other disciplines as well. And I don't doubt that there is, with people who have looked really empirically at how online dating over the last 15, 20 years, and particularly with the swipey apps, has changed the game and the incentive structure out there. Because I think people have all kinds of intuition about it, but I don't know that that is actually borne out in the data. There definitely, there's a whole different set of pressures on both men and women. And that is not just down to online dating, it's down to changing sexual norms and birth control and everything else that has gone along with that. But definitely you do have women in general under a lot more pressure to be sexually available earlier, and you have the perception in general of men that there is an infinite marketplace for casual mating in a way that was not the case before the swipey apps. And so those two things just alone seem like really fundamental shifts in the landscape, but I don't know what that has done empirically to dating relationships or to happiness or to dating success or marriage or any of that kind of stuff. And I'm sure there are eggheads who have looked at that and can tell us. And we've said before, this would be a great, for somebody who wants to write an evolutionary psychology dissertation, this would be a really good topic.
Yeah, I would say, just as a sort of super high concept, the super high concept is you've got human nature that sits with its dip switches set, within narrow parameters. In other words, you're not going to learn to like dog poop. You're not going to learn to dislike apples. You know what I mean? You're not probably going to learn to like sour apples. You're going to like Honeycrisp apples better. In other words, you're designed by nature with sort of parametric, things set by your genetic code. And I believe that that's going to be different depending upon which continent your ancestors most recently came from, and probably even locations on those continents. So there's going to be people that are more extroverted, people that are more open, people that are more disagreeable, et cetera, et cetera. This is all part of the mix. I don't really care about groups. I care about fundamentally individuals. However, once we're talking about an individual, that individual sits in a social psychological context that can be changing. So I think we would agree that this is different than 1945, okay? And 1945 was different from 1965, and 1965 somewhat different than 1985. So the question is, with this, what would we expect to have happened? And we wouldn't expect, for example, you could say, well, with all this sort of casual mating possibility, wouldn't the male be irritated if they aren't having sex in his car within 15 minutes of meeting the girl at the coffee shop? And we would say, well, that's ridiculous. That's not how humans work. And it's like, well, that's interesting, because that's how 99% of mammals work. So why not humans? And the answer is no. That's not how the little dip switches in humans are set. They're not set that way. Okay. And then we would say, okay, well, what did it used to be? And this is where the empirical evidence would be interesting. What, of a 25-year-old woman that was single in 1995, what was the statistical likelihood of her sleeping on any given date? First date, second date, third date, fourth date, et cetera. What was the mean, median, and mode? What does that distribution look like? That's a good snapshot of what is, a pre-internet world and what that actually looks like. Now, let's suppose that is 3.37, that's the median decision time on somewhere between the third and the fourth date is this most statistically. I think that's not a bad guess. Okay. Now, and some people are going to be saying, you've got to be kidding. I've never gone longer than the second date. Somebody else is going to be saying, you've got to be kidding. I would never sleep with anybody until I've been out with them for a couple of months. In other words, i.e. genetic variation, but let's suppose my eyeball estimate sits at 3.37. Okay, well now what is it at 2020? Same person, 25 years later. Now what do we have? Well, I don't think we've got it at 1.37. I don't think it's going to be 2.37. I don't think you're going to push reality that far. Could you push it to 2.87? Seems plausible and likely. Okay. These are these interesting questions. This is exactly what Jen's talking about. Like, we've got a lot of intuition. We can see where the pressures are, but until you actually stare at the numbers, we don't even know what's happening. So my suspicion is it's gone from 3.37 to 2.77. Okay, but I don't think it's gone from 3.37 to 2.37. I don't think that there's been that much force and that much ability to impact the female brain to basically give up the goods that much faster. I don't believe that's true, but it also gets more complicated. We don't even know who's meeting who. It could be a different mix of people. The combinations could be better than the blind dates that took place, or they could be worse because they are blind relative to the people that you went out with for the first time you already knew pretty well from work, church, or school. So who the hell knows? And it's a pretty complicated data set, but it would be sure interesting to see the main effects. And I don't know what they are.
The one thing that I am aware of is this kind of there is some empirical evidence on this kind of He-Man effect, and you know the incel community getting bigger and bigger. And so I just brought up, I don't know what's reliable survey data and what's not here, but we have between 2009 and 2018, so just in that period of time, sexual behavior increased from 28% of young men and 49% that report these are people who are reporting no sexual activity at all. So it's actually declining for more men. It's gone from 28% of young men in 2009 to 43%. And for women, 49% to 74%. And so,
wow.
And there's also,
meaning they haven't had sex, or
they
they
haven't
had
had
sexually. Wow.
Haven't had, I think that's in the last year. And then I've seen other stats and I'm having trouble finding them here just on the fly. But the percentage of young men in particular who are virgins up to quite a like up to age 30 or something is approaching something like 30%. And so it's in that, you know, we have that data over quite a long period of time, and it's a market increase. It's a really, really significant increase. So you do have fewer young men who are having sex than they were 10, 20 years ago, for sure. Women, the story I think is more complicated. But so is that dating apps? Is it social media? Is it, there's a lot of different factors that could be at play there. It
could be marijuana, antidepressants.
Absolutely. Antidepressants.
Overweight,
totally. So there's a lot of factors that are going into this kind of mating dysfunction among young people in general. But you can't rule out the dating apps. The dating apps have definitely are going to be playing some role in that variance. And like I said, the research is out there. I'm just not super familiar with it.
Yeah, I have a little bit of an intuition, and I could, I mean, now we're just might as well speculate. Heck, it's our podcast. We can do whatever we want. But part of it is just the increasing fractionization of somebody's village. So you now, you know, basically in the 1950s and 60s, when you go to college, even to a junior college, you're going to find a mate. In other words, and that is that you're looking to get married. In other words, well, because there isn't birth control very, very effective. It's about, and you're coming out of a more puritanical age. It's about having sex. So a lot of people are going to say, well, we're not going to have sex till we get married. And so I remember it was slightly scandalous for me to find out that some people were having sex before they got married in 1970. You know what I mean? It wasn't really that. It was a little bit frowned upon, you know, college age people, as far as that goes. Whereas now we wouldn't even think twice. It's now we're talking about, you know, 10th graders, and that's where that goes. So as I was saying, slightly lost.
Coalition fracturing.
Coalition fracturing. So the point is that people sort of got busy because the sexualities were going to be tied to marriage. So people were getting married. I remember reading remarkably late in the game, maybe, I don't know, 1990 or so, that the median age of people getting married was like 22. And it had moved from like 21 to 22 and a half, you know, from 20 years earlier. I remember being unbelievably stunned by this because I was thinking, gosh, isn't it 30? Because that's where all my sort of cohort, was that's where it was all going down, was at about age 30, i.e. when everybody got out of grad school. So but I had lost touch with reality, apparently, because the whole world was still, huge components of them were still getting married, from 20 years old to 24, 25 years old. And again, I would find that hard to believe that what that isn't an echo of is an echo of abstinence until marriage, or at least sexual conservative till marriage, and that, et cetera, just a more sexually conservative, zeitgeist, what I mean, around the whole culture was still driving that kind of decision making, and people were still falling into that. And I feel like then what happens is, if you get out of that and people aren't making those decisions and just leaping into these things kind of early, then where are you? You're out of school. Now you're working, as a clerk in an insurance office. Now what happens? And the answer is, you're in a fractured village. Like, all those people are not congregated in the same place they were in high school and college. You don't have 1,000 of them right there, and you're not on this sort of fairly urgently time clock. You know what I mean? That we've got to be making our bids and making our best deal and making a deal and getting on with it. It's like, no, this is just, we're just passing through. We're not even getting serious for another decade. And at that point, then the people are now living inside of a fractured village where suddenly, there's, they don't have the sort of, they're not congregating in church. They're the work. Incidentally, another factor that I believe is true, I've seen evidence of this that I hadn't thought of before as a factor, and that is that an awful lot of companies are smaller than they were before. So the average size businesses, what I mean, there's an awful lot of businesses with 5 people, 10 people, 15 people, as opposed to 700 people. So as a result of that, I think there's less people working in large congregations where there would be a lot of people about their same age. And so I think that's going to drive down. Now you've eliminated work, you've eliminated school. If you don't go to church, where the hell of a lot of people are not going to be affiliated with the church, where are you? And the answer is, you're nowhere. It's funny you said the He-Man effect, Jen. Is that because then who makes hay on the apps is just the top,
the 9s and 10s. It absolutely, and we know that OkCupid has that great data that shows that.
Yes.
And so that's, I think most men on the dating apps are not having success. And most women are able to have casual mating success, but are struggling to find pair bonds on the apps, to make a slight understatement of the century. So, what happens is this sort of runaway effect of He-Man casual dating strategy. And so that is going to further depress the incentives of the rest of the men to even participate in the game. And you see that for sure. And it's going to increase the pressure on women to be sexually available faster, and to essentially lower their cost. The other thing I found, what I was looking for here, this is a difference between men surveyed between 2000 and 2002, and men surveyed between 2016 and 18. So even this is several years old now. And this is men reporting whether they have been sexually active in the last year. And that number has changed from 18.9 to 30.9 of reporting that they have not had any sexual activity in a year.
Wow.
And so, I mean, it's a huge effect. And I'm sure it's bigger now than it was even six years ago. And because the swipey apps were really just kind of coming into their own at that point. So everything that we're talking about, we're just kind of speculating, and it's a little silly because I am sure there is a literature, but all of these variables, there's not going to be just one smoking gun. It's going to be a combination of all of these things, but definitely the apps are a culprit.
Big effect sizes. Whatever's happening is sociologically stunning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. All right.
So there you go. Cheerful
That's
stuff.
what we know.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Please make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. It really helps out the channel a ton. If you have questions or a life situation that you'd like the doctors to analyze, send it in through the website at www.beatyourgenes.org. Thanks everyone, and see you all next show.